Hello, welcome to Basics of Immigration, Immigrant Visas. If you remember from the very beginning segment, we talked about people coming into the United States as an immigrant. They are coming here to stay. And if they are actually admitted as an immigrant, they become an LPR, a lawful permanent resident. Today, we will talk a little bit about how someone gets an immigrant visa and then becomes an LPR. As a quick review, let's look at the process of coming in. There were two options. One option was to go to the consulate, and to get an immigrant visa. And then come to the port of entry, with visa in hand, come to the port of entry, be admitted into the United States as an LPR. The second option was to come into the United States as a non-immigrant, and once they are here, they can apply to adjust their status. That's a special term, adjust status. And if that's granted, when they leave, they now become an LPR, lawful permanent resident. They're an immigrant here. They can stay here as long as they want. Eventually, they can become a citizen. Today, we're going to talk about what happens before that. How do they even get an immigrant visa in the first place? Here is the basic process of how that happens. For most people, a U.S. person or a U.S. company petitions the government for an alien to come to the country. I'm a U.S. citizen. I'm going to petition for someone to come. If the government says okay, then that person goes to one of these places and asks to get their visa and to be admitted into the United States as an immigrant. Knowing that, I have a question for you to think about. If you were Congress, if you were the ones making the laws, who would you allow me to petition for? If I'm a U.S. citizen, who would you allow me to petition to come into the United States? That is a very important question. It's a question that has been asked throughout the history of our country and that every country has to ask. Why do we think that there's a relationship that's important enough to allow this person to come into the United States? All right, let's see what our Congress has decided. There are two basic categories that we will start with. The first one is family. Congress has said family should be able to come into the United States. So over here, we have the United States citizen or LPR. This could include an LPR. We'll put them down here. We have the citizen or the LPR. Their family can come into the United States. Which family members do you think should get to come? Well, Congress has looked at that, and Congress has said, here's who we think should get to come. Their spouse, their children, we'll come back to that, their parents, and brothers and sisters. That's it. No cousins, aunts, uncles, children's spouses, children's children, called grandchildren, no grandparents, no one else, just these people right here. If the person petitioning is an LPR, they only get their spouse and children. Okay. Under children can be a lot of different things. So we have minor unmarried children. We also have married children, and we have adult children, also called sons and daughters, but I'm going to call them children for right now. And adult is 21 or plus. You can see how that makes sense. It's more important, like we would treat bringing my 3-year-old son differently than my 35-year-old son who's married and has 3 children of his own. We're going to treat those a little bit different. Within these categories, Congress has given preference to certain groups. For example, a spouse and minor unmarried children are a higher preference of being able to come into the United States than a brother or sister, for example. So I'm not going to go into those preferences. You can watch other tutorials online about them if you want, but just know that there are preferences. There are differences within these groups of people. And that's pretty logical. That makes sense. If everybody can't come, you have to decide who's a priority. And some people, like a spouse and a minor child, would be a higher priority. That's family. Now let's look at employment-based. For what we will talk about today, we're going to keep it really simple. And it's fairly similar when we keep it simple. It can get way more complex if you actually want to petition for someone to come, or you want to petition to come. This will get way more complicated. Here's the basic concept. Instead of a US person, we have a US entity, a company or a church or a school or something, some entity that is going to apply for people. Now, there are preferences here too that I'm not going to get into a lot today, but here are some of the things we look at. What kinds of skills they have, what kind of experience they have, what kinds of needs we have in the United States. Is this something that we can hire some, but we need some more? Or is it something we can't find at all in the United States? We have to get from somewhere else. We also look at what kind of money they bring. We do allow people to come in if they have lots of money and they want to invest it in the United States. Those would get a different priority. Lots of different categories within this, but the key thing to know is that the company petitions just like the person petitions. The company or the person files a petition with the United States government and says, I'll do it with a person. They would say, I'm a US citizen, and Bobby is really my husband. Bobby is really my son. Please let Bobby come to the United States. Or if I'm a company, I'm this company, here's my business plan, here's my bank accounts to show I'm a real company. I need this skill set. Bobby has this skill set. Please let Bobby come work for me. So whichever category it is, the US entity first files a petition. I will go ahead and just briefly mention there are some things in employment and in family actually where people can self-petition. They can just say, I am the best photographer in the world. You want me in the US, please let me come. That is a real thing. We won't get into it a lot right now. Again, we're covering the basic of how most people come, but that is a real thing where people can self-petition, especially in employment. But in general, you have a US entity that petitions. They petition. If the petition is approved, then when it's time, and I'm not going to get into that today, but when the line moves up and it's time for someone to go, non-citizen alien goes to the consulate and says, there's an approved petition. Will you give me a visa? So with the approved petition, now they go ask for the visa, they get the visa, they come in, they are an LPR. Or if they're a non-immigrant in the United States, the petition is approved, they go to USCIS and say, there's an approved petition, will you please give me an immigrant visa? And if they get one, then yes, you get your immigrant visa and you become an LPR. An important thing to note about that, it is a two-step process. First petition, and then apply here, apply for a visa or apply for adjustment of status. 2 steps. You can have a situation where someone has an approved visa. Yes, Bobby is your son, but when he goes to apply for an immigrant visa, the consulate says, yeah, I see that your mom is a US citizen, but you've committed a certain crime or immigration violations or other things that could prevent them from getting immigrant status. So it's not a guarantee. It is a 2-part process before they are able to come in and become an LPR. But that's the basic concept of an immigrant visa and how it works. These sections here, the different priorities, what people have to do to petition for someone, gets quite complicated. You can read it about online. If you want to ask me questions and I feel like it fits into the basic part, I'm happy to answer those questions. Before we close today, I want to talk about one other way that people can get an immigrant visa. There are a few other ways, and some of them will come up in another segment. But for right now, I want to talk about one other way that's pretty unique. The first time I ever heard about this, I said, there's no way that's real. But it turns out it is real. And it is called a diversity visa. A long time ago, when our current immigration law was written, which I'll talk more about in another segment, Congress looked at this and said, well, if everybody comes based on their family relationship, and by the way, side note, about 75% of the people who come into the United States do come through a family relationship. We put a lot of priority on families in the United States. But Congress looked at that and said, if everyone comes through family relationships, we're going to have the same nationalities immigrating to the United States all the time. So our country is going to tilt heavily in the direction of whatever countries are already here. That makes sense. And they said, but we want to allow people to come who don't have family members so that we get a wider variety of people, but also people who are from a country, it's a different country, can have the chance to immigrate to the United States. And they created the diversity visa. The general idea is this is actually a lottery. If you are from a country, and there's a list online that you can go to and say, is this a diversity country? If you are from a country that meets that criteria, then you can pay to file essentially this petition type thing But you can file an application and say, hey, I want to come to the United States. And I'm from whatever country is on the list. And every year, the United States draws out of the lottery. That's really what happens. They pick people randomly. I've known people that have applied for this 4 and 5 different times. It's very expensive to apply, very expensive, which helps fund other programs. But they've paid $4,000 and $5,000 each year just for a chance, and they still never get it. On the other hand, I've known other people who've applied, and the first time they applied, they actually got a diversity visa. If you get picked, let me just put here so I have something. This is a lottery. If you do get picked, then you take your visa and you go to one of these things and say, hey, I got picked for the diversity visa. Can I please have an immigrant visa or a just status? And the government would look at you and make sure that so now you have a visa available, make sure that you actually get to come in as an LPR. You'll meet people, if you talk to people that came in under this category, it's pretty unique and interesting category there, the diversity lottery, and people do call it the lottery. So if someone says they got here in the lottery, don't laugh at them. They really did. The first time I heard it, I didn't believe it, but it's a real thing. Okay, I think that's it for today with this category. And I'm only hesitating because the preference idea in here, I'm just going to write it down here. I may do another video about it, but you can find it online. It makes a whole complicated system with math and lines and dates and all kinds of things. I'll definitely refer to it in another segment, whether I try to explain it or not. You might just find another video, but that is an important part of immigrant visas. But most important, I want you to walk away with the 2-part process. Petition by a US person, generally, and then the application by the alien to say, hey, can I immigrate to the United States? All right, that's immigrant visas in the basics of immigration.